In this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about the firing bolt and some of the general concepts that are sort of antagonistic to each other and what might be the most logical way to think about this. You have the air chamber here, and it's really a closed system here in between these two O-rings. You can see that it creates an air chamber there with this little hole which feeds air from the regulator. So when the regulator is filled with air and the trigger is pulled, the air is going to go into this little hole. It's going to fill the air chamber with air, and then it's going to go out the only way that it can go, which is out through here. It's going to push the firing bolt forward, and the air is going to go out through here. And that's why this is really the most vulnerable O-ring, the one that's in here. That's because it can easily get blown out and it's getting the full force. But your firing bolt is going to go forward with the air pressure and in the shot. It's going to go forward and then it's going to go back. And the speed in which this firing bolt goes forward is going to be determined by, one, the amount of air pressure you put in, the amount of air, the size of your air chamber, the lubrication and how smooth this bolt moves on the air chamber. And also the other parameter that we often don't think about in this concept, and our desire is to make this go faster and to push the ball faster, more FPS, more power. But the other parameter that's acting as a force to push the bolt back is acting against that, and that's the spring. So this is a FSC spring that I bought. And this is just essentially the one that you get when you buy an FSC. And that's going to basically be on here, and that's going to provide the force to push the bolt back. This is the spring that everyone is replacing. We're removing this one and we're getting rid of it. Well, the reality is this spring is the weaker spring. So by being a weaker spring, that means that the bolt is going to go faster. So you're going to get more power with the weaker spring because there's less resistance. But that comes at a cost. As the bolt goes forward faster because the spring is weaker and your barrel is right here, that's what's putting the pressure against the spring, there's more chance that the bolt will collide with the barrel and you'll damage your pin and you'll damage your bolt and you'll end up replacing this whole unit. So that's why we get away from this spring, because the bolt goes too fast with this spring at high power. But then we decided, well, we'll remove this spring, and now we want to use a VKS spring, and it is definitely a better spring. So this is the FSC spring, VKS spring. Let me see if I can compress this one. See, I can compress that one pretty well, but it's so long. The VKS spring, in contrast, is very hard to compress, and I just flew it across the room. So I'll use my other one. So the bottom line is this one is stronger, and so when you use the stronger spring, we think, well, that's great. We're protecting our bolt. We're not going to hit the barrel. Be less likely to have this collision here. But when you do that, the thing that you probably are not thinking about is this is actually, because it's a stronger spring, it's going to slow down the bolt speed. It's going to reduce your FPS. You're going to conserve air because you're going to use less air. It's going to quickly reset the bolt, so you use less air per shot. But it's working against you on the FPS. So it's a kind of a catch-22. You can either make the bolt go faster or you can make the bolt go slower. If the bolt goes faster, there's risk that you can break your bolt. Eventually, if you keep increasing your FPS, or you have this thing optimized to such that it's lubricated or it's treated in a way that this bolt moves really fast, or you're feeding more air from your HPA tank, or you've done some other modifications to make the bolt go faster, eventually you're going to reach a point where you're going to overcome this spring as well, and you're also going to compress it to the point that you touch the barrel and you break your bolt. The breech. So let me do it. This is the breech part. That's where it's going to contact, right there. See the contact? So that's an issue. There's a fine line. You can always keep playing with this back and forth, you've got a force going this way, a force going this way, something's going to give eventually, and usually it's going to be your spring. So we keep, testing the limits with these springs, but if the spring gets too strong, and I can tell you from my experience, and I don't have a video on this, and I don't have a spring available in my hand right now, but I have bought aftermarket springs. Any spring that you get that's really any stronger than this VKS spring, it just won't work. It's too tight. You can't even get your barrel in. If you try to put your barrel in and twist it, it just won't get into the groove and lock properly. This is about as strong of a spring as you can use. And this seems to be the consensus that everyone wants something about this. And it doesn't have to be this exact VKS spring from Pepperball. You can do measurements and you can come up with one that's an aftermarket spring that's basically just as good. It doesn't have to have the exact same number of coils, but if it has the same force, the number of newtons that it can sustain, if they're similar, it's going to work just as well. But I do think it needs to be a similar length. Obviously, if it's too long or too short, it can cause problems. And so these are things that were worked out, but this is certainly a length that works really well. So I just wanted to talk about this for a few minutes because I think it's certainly a topic that everyone's interested in. Everyone wants more power, but we want to do it safely. And I think when I think about this and I think about the back and forth between the spring and the bolt, I come to the conclusion that the bolt is already able to go fast enough. I can increase the, this is not the VKS air chamber, but if I have the VKS air chamber, it's big enough and there's enough air potential from your HPA tanks that you can push this bolt fast enough that any spring, including this spring, is gonna completely compress enough that you're gonna break your bolt. So I don't see any advantage in trying to make the bolt go faster. I see only advantages in trying to find the right balance between the bolt and the spring so that you get maximum reliability. And so that's just the way I think about it. And I'll be happy to discuss more. Leave me your comments and questions, concerns. I think this is more of a discussion, and I like to talk about these less lethals and how they can be best used. And so I welcome the debate and the conversation. And nobody's right, nobody's wrong. Everybody has different opinions. And I fall on the more conservative side when it comes to these modifications. But if you like these types of topics, and I plan to do more videos in the future, please subscribe to my channel, share it with people, and we'll see you next time.